Good evening and welcome to the May 10th, 2022 edition of the Downers Grove Village Council. I am your starting pitcher tonight, Mayor Pro Tem Greg Jose. We anticipate that Mayor Barnett may be joining us later and coming out of the bullpen. But let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everybody. We have, as always, copies of the agenda on the tables at the sides of the chamber. We also have everything available at downers.us. Before I ask for the roll call, just an FYI, without objection from my colleagues, in the anticipation that the mayor will be joining us, I'd like to move items 3, 5, and 6 on the agenda. That's proclamations, public comments, and the mayor's report to the end, in the hope that we have a full complement once we get to those items. Thank you. Rosa, could we please call the roll?
Mayor Barnett. Commissioner Jose.
Here.
Commissioner Wallace.
Here.
Commissioner Sadowski-Fugit. Here. Commissioner Colavani.
Here.
Commissioner Gilmartin.
Here.
Commissioner Glover.
Here.
Thank you very much. We have a quorum. That brings us to the minutes of prior council meetings. Is there a motion?
Mayor Pro Tem, I move that the council adopt the meeting minutes from May 3rd, 2022 as presented.
Second.
Any comments, questions, or corrections with regard to the minutes? Members of the public? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The minutes are adopted unanimously. That brings us to item 7, the consent agenda. May I have a motion on the consent agenda?
Mayor, I move that the council adopt the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded. Is there any public comment? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Commissioner Wallace.
Aye.
Commissioner Sadowski-Fugit. Aye. Commissioner Glover.
Aye.
Commissioner Gilmartin.
Aye.
Commissioner Colavani.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Jose.
Aye. That matter passes unanimously. We have several items on our active agenda tonight. Is there a motion with regard to item A?
Mayor Pro Tem, I move to adopt an ordinance vacating a certain portion of a public right-of-way in the village of Downers Grove, the Downers Grove Civic Center as presented.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded. Is there any comment from the public on item A?
The active agenda.
Yes, we're at active agenda item A.
Given last week when all of these were handled as a bulk, how are public comments intended to be discussed this evening if you're going to go through on an item-by-item basis?
Well, I would say if you have anything with regard to the vacating of the right-of-way, why don't we go ahead and take that now? If you're thinking about a different piece of the Civic Center property, might be more appropriate for one of the other motions, but I don't know everything you have to say.
All right. So you're going to go one by one tonight,
Yes.
and then you just...
Yeah, there will not be an omnibus motion. Any other public comment? Members of the council? Hearing nothing, roll call, please.
Commissioner Wallace.
Aye.
Commissioner Sadowski-Fugit. Aye. Commissioner Glover.
Aye.
Commissioner Gilmartin.
Aye.
Commissioner Colavani.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Jose.
Aye. That matter passes unanimously. May I have a motion with regard to item B?
Mayor Pro Tem, I move to approve the final plat of subdivision of the Village of Downers Grove Civic Center.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any public comment on the approval of the final plat of subdivision? Hearing no public comment, members of the council? Okay, roll call, please.
Commissioner Wallace.
Aye.
Commissioner Sadowski-Fugit. Aye. Commissioner Glover.
Aye.
Commissioner Gilmartin.
Aye.
Commissioner Colavani.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Jose.
Aye. That matter passes unanimously. May I have a motion with regard to item C?
Mayor Pro Tem, I move to adopt an ordinance amending the zoning ordinance of the Village of Downers Grove, Illinois to designate the property at 700, 801, and 825 Burlington Avenue and 842 Curtis Street, Downers Grove Civic Center as Planned Unit Development Number 66 as presented.
Second.
Any public comment on item C, the planned unit development?
I don't know from the substance of these which my comment is most aptly made, but I'll go ahead and make it now and
Very good.
see what happens. The discussion of the proposed facility plan's impact on the immediate neighborhood elicited, among other things, a reminder of another instance in which council opted to change ordinance to suit a developer, Gilbert Street a few years back, Longfellow more recently. Last week's meeting, neighbors to the proposed TIF district questioned and proposed the cell tower's conformance to regulation, and I'm not going to talk much about the tower. Mr. Olson stated that he was surprised when the Plan Commission voted unanimously in favor, in spite of its skepticism regarding the proposed new comm tower and its placement. I'd encourage Mr. Olson and all Downers Grove residents to appreciate in light of Council's Longfellow decision, it's clear the Plan Commission's vote, whatever its outcome, is irrelevant. Simply part of the pro forma process Council follows to yield an appearance of democracy without its substance. Plan Commission's vote in February was 0-7 against the proposed language change, and Council voted 7-0 in favor. Parenthetically, I'll note the Joint Review Board seemed another pro forma exercise. Its meeting lasted all of 30 minutes. What role its public member was supposed to play is hard to tell if one reads the minutes. Last month's public hearing on the TIF was more pro forma as well, less than and not one of useful dialogue. As the mayor in waiting made clear in response to a comment made by Marshall Schmidt on a separate matter, council does no more than it's required to do to maintain the appearance of being democratic. We heard the mayor in waiting and Commissioner Calavani defend the TIF and the facility plan as though where we are now is the culmination of a long intentional process, but where we are is in fact the result of a series of prior unexpected failures. All of them due to the simple problem based on two core values of the village: deferring maintenance as long as possible and keeping property taxes low, which forces council to rely on new money coming into the village from some outside source to make up for the revenue shortfall and lack of reserves thanks to the low property taxes. That's what's happening in Downers Grove with this TIF, and that's what happened with Longfellow. Indeed, in each case, the underlying rationale reflects the reality that Downers Grove taxing bodies continue to play catch-up for failing to collect sufficient tax in the past for what should have been treated as foreseeable expenses. Having failed for so long to collect sufficient tax, there's a lot of catching up to do. This deficiency arises in council's case from its modus operandi, summarized as a triumvirate of goals, the two I mentioned a moment ago, and minimizing its list of official duties as much as possible. I'd argue that this triumvirate is hardly an emblem of competence in which to take pride when council has no idea the long-term consequences of such an approach. Commissioner Calavani characterized the areas in which council doesn't get involved as fancy things. Few would consider a village hall and police station a fancy thing, yet here we are, struggling to put a new facility in place because it doesn't have the money to pay, council doesn't have the money to pay for it from its own resources without selling property. I know my observation will continue to be ignored, but using the term sustainable when talking about the plan is simply following others' inappropriate use of the term. I repeat, less than before and sustainable are not the same. You've made no effort to provide any empirical data showing the new facility is any more sustainable than the current arrangement, had the buildings even been aptly refurbished, for example. The new building's also intended to promote efficient operation of village business. Happy to be directed to data showing the gain expected on that front, so I'll not hold my breath. I was also struck to hear council discuss with the architects the new assembly room, especially the preferability of the space manifesting a feeling of flexibility versus one of authority. The contrast centered around the height of the dais. Not surprisingly, the mayor-in-waiting said, though not so bluntly, he likes the intimidation of a raised dais. I must say I also find it ironically amusing council intends the plaza area in front of the building to be designed in honor and promote civil rights. I presume that symbolic gesture will be deemed sufficient to offset the village's ongoing support for the structural inequalities perpetuated by the state's heavy reliance on property taxes to pay for education and local government services, a system that drives the rising inequality and its attendant social problems in Illinois, none of which matters much to residents of Downers Grove as long as the castle wall of rising house prices keeps the problems out of Downers Grove. And best of all, if the walls are breached, the village will have a spanking new police facility in which to house the miscreants.
Thank you. And in case you were wondering, that was pretty relevant to this part, so thank you, David. Any other public comment? Members of the council? Just a couple of things. The village has no lack of reserves. We're actually AAA rated and have the recommended level of reserves for a town of our size with a budget of our size. Previous councils not passing a new facilities project, I think, is just the democratic process playing out. And I think that's what you're seeing here today. We've got unanimous agreement on how to move forward. The idea that we're going to somehow tax more because we could, I think, is a bad one. We've done, I think, if I do say so myself, a darn good job balancing expenses and revenues. Selling land for economic development as opposed to keeping it in government hands, I think, is also a good thing. And yeah, I was pretty blunt. I like the raised dais. And if I recall correctly, it was unanimous. Be that as it may. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Wallace?
Aye.
Commissioner Sadowski-Fugit? Aye. Commissioner Glover?
Aye.
Commissioner Gilmartin?
Aye.
Commissioner Cullivaney?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Jose?
Aye. That matter passes unanimously. May I have a motion with regard to item D?
Mayor Pro Tem, I move to adopt an ordinance rezoning certain property located at 700, 801, and 825 Burlington Avenue and 842 Curtis Street, Downers Grove Civic Center as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any public comment?
I was going to save some of these comments for the general public comment, but given the way you've chosen to reconfigure the agenda, I'll take my opportunity to speak on the agenda items now, but what I had to say is very relevant. My name is Marshall Schmidt, and tonight I will talk about the skill of engaging with a community, which this village council has demonstrated over the last 6 months a complete inability of doing. To engage means to participate, to become involved in. It does not mean hiding behind legal requirements as a crutch to avoid engaging. Honoring the law that requires public comment and then insulting citizens who do so without giving them the opportunity to respond is not engaging. Honoring the law that requires a neighborhood meeting and then going through the motions is not engaging. Going on social media, repeating the myths that you have propagated during village hall meetings by quoting each other is not engaging. That is called propaganda. Engaging is having a meaningful dialogue with the community where there is a give and take and you are all forced to defend your opinions, positions, and actions in an open forum. Watching the process unfold last week when these items were on the agenda for a first reading demonstrated what I'm saying. You clearly, this village council, this village staff, has not engaged with the community on the issues that are posed by this. And I'll have more to say in the next agenda item in particular, given the absence of the mayor. But let me just say that with regard to Longfellow, which is what I was going to comment on originally, like last week, citizens pleaded with members of this village council to conduct public meetings at which there would be a meaningful give and take. There would be a discussion, a back and forth, categorically refused. Not a single member of the village council did that. When it was raised, there were emails that were sent that there will absolutely be no public hearing or no public meeting on Longfellow. Those emails were sent after, at a coffee with the council, a member of this council promised that this council would listen to the community. Sitting up there during public comment and then ignoring is not engaging. That's not listening. I want to identify two other vagaries of not engaging because they're playing out in real time. This weekend I was out of town and I came back to drive by the Longfellow property, and what should I see? This is Sunday afternoon. A huge concrete truck sitting in the middle of Sealy, making it very difficult to get up and down Sealy, and next to it a huge truck that contained concrete materials. So I took the village manager's invitation to call him and complain because I thought those were the doings of the contractor. But no, he informed me it was the village. It was the village that had left its equipment in a neighborhood that is already hurting from the destruction of the Longfellow property. When you don't engage, the village council takes on the characteristics of the entities that have captured it. And that's exactly what happened. They didn't care. No one cared about parking the trucks in our neighborhood because the contractors don't care about that. I want to also cite one other example before you move on in your agenda of the vagaries. And this focuses on the vagaries of hiding behind social media when you're insecure in your position. The mayor recently went on social media to repeat the company line that the recent zoning amendment was intended merely to protect property owners' rights. But Mayor, oh, he's not here, I'm sorry. He's not going to hear me. We'll talk about that next. But Mayor, what about the property rights of all of those people in the Longfellow neighborhood who for decades, and more recently, relied on the requirements of the plain language of the zoning ordinance? By amending the ordinance to gut it, to allow 12 homes instead of 8, you ignored all of their rights. Should we thank you for that? I don't think so. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Members of the council? I would only say that engaging in meaningful dialogue runs two ways. That hurling baseless falsehoods and insults and that sort of thing at the council right out of the box in some instances does not really work to foster meaningful dialogue either. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Wallace?
Aye.
Commissioner Sadowski-Fugit? Aye. Commissioner Glover?
Aye.
Commissioner Gilmartin?
Aye.
Commissioner Colavani?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Jose?
Aye. Item D passes unanimously. May I have a motion with regard to item E?
Mayor, I move to adopt an ordinance authorizing a special use for the Downers Grove Civic Center to permit construction of a freestanding wireless telecommunications tower as presented.
Second.
Oh, we're getting some public comment here, right?
You are. I hope that none of you think that Mr. Schmidt and I compared notes before tonight, because we actually didn't. I don't think I'll be able to say what he said as eloquently. I'm certainly not as experienced in the comings and goings of local government as he is. But I will say last week was the first meeting of this type I'd ever attended in anything other than a professional capacity. And I was just stunned by the arrogance of each one of the council members. You know, you heard from a bunch of residents about serious concerns and specific questions. Those were raised first with the village staff, these folks sitting over here. Engagement was promised. We waited. Then at the last minute, we were told, nope, show up at the public meeting. That's engagement. All right. Now, either the village staff made that decision based on instructions from the city council or our absent mayor, or they did it on their own. If it's the latter, then we need a new staff. If it's the former, then we need a new council. Because that is not the way you should treat the folks that literally are your neighbors. My property borders this facility. And the few of you that did address concerns, you disingenuously rephrased the question. You said, oh, let me talk about this other thing. I'm not going to address the actual points that have been raised. The emails that have been sent to village staff and village council asking very detailed questions. Have you done this? Couldn't we do this? No, none of you engaged with that. The closest that anyone came was Councilman Jose, who just sarcastically dismisses my comparison of this body to a 1970s Soviet Politburo. Well, you know what? Having seen what's gone on here, I would confess that might not be the most apt analogy. I think it's more like a Richard J. Daley Chicago machine politics, right? Because let's think about what's going on here. Our party boss, the absent mayor, decided he wanted this project to happen. There's absolutely no dispute that his home benefits from the relocation of this cell tower. You all, I'm sure, Councilman Jose, Mayor-to-be Jose, you are probably in your typical smug fashion going to sit there and say, oh, baseless falsehoods. No, it's geography. Let's go get a tape measure. This tower is being moved away from his house and towards mine, in utter derogation of every code that we have, including health and safety codes. When that conflict of interest was raised last week, the mayor said nothing. All right, frankly, that didn't surprise me. What surprised me more was that none of you said anything. You know that this benefits him. So we've got our local party boss who says, I want this proposal. It's going to help my property. Let's do it. And each one of you appears to just be going along. I see our mayor's absent tonight. I assume because at this point, even he realizes this looks so bad he shouldn't be here. All right? But you all can still do something about it. But I'm pretty sure the reason he isn't here tonight is because he knows you've got his back. This is going to pass. It's probably going to pass unanimously. This town deserves better leadership. I hope we get it. Thankfully, the court system will have a say if you approve this. But I would really like table it. Give us more time for discussion. At least engage with us. But the path that you all are on now is nothing but reminiscent of 1960 Chicago machine politics, the very thing that I hear Councilman Jose rail against. Thank you.
Thank you.
I won't be so charitable to the mayor. A clear conflict of interest was raised. Instead of being transparent and engaging the community and acknowledging that there is a conflict of interest and recusing himself from the discussion, he's hiding. He's flat out hiding.
All right, Marshall, I'm going to interrupt you real quick, and I'm not going to charge you any time. And I don't normally like throwing other people's business out there, but he's actually celebrating one of his children over at Downers North, so let's drop the theater.
That's
and get on
fine.
to the comments.
But
Thanks.
he is the mayor of this town. He knew this was an issue, okay? If he's celebrating a birthday, he could have arranged to move the celebration so that he could be here at a time when his absence looks awful bad, okay? And, you know, in my profession and in yours, Commissioner Jose, it's often the appearance of impropriety that is enough to cause a problem. And this is an appearance of impropriety, that he is not here, that he has a conflict of interest to which he is unwilling to admit, and he is going to let the six of you carry his water. That is not engagement. That is manipulating the process. That is maneuvering and manipulating the governmental process on a series of extremely important issues to this village. And as you said, this topic, this whole redevelopment of the village complex, has been discussed for years. And when it comes up for final approval, the mayor isn't here when he's been accused of a conflict of interest, and he hasn't even admitted it. That is not high-functioning government. That is dysfunctional government. And that is something that this council needs to address, or as my predecessor just said, this council to a member needs to be replaced.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I do want to echo what my neighbor, Mr. Klepper, said. We've been asking for clarity on a lot of issues since the open house, probably. We've had a lot of emails back and forth with no responses. As I've noted last week, I would like to at least, thank Mr. Gilmartin for responding without the company line and giving me a little bit of feedback. We're still, obviously not happy about this. I showed you the pictures last week and what it's going to look like if I ever have to sell my home. That's going to absolutely deter buyers. I did see the proposed landscaping. I would like to understand more detail of what that's going to entail and if we actually can get engaged with that process. Having meaningful dialogue and ensure that what's being placed back there is sufficient. I do also want to mention that we have had an open petition online. There's about 320 signatures opposed to this movement of the tower. So it's not just the 5 of us. There's a lot of people who aren't happy about the things that you guys are doing behind the scenes to adjust the code so that we can have the placement where you want it. So with that said, I really ask and hope that we can have some meaningful dialogue around the landscaping, if that's, the olive branch you guys are giving us. Because I understand from the little communication I have, this is going through, so that's all I have.
Could we get your name for the record, please?
Sarah DePasquale,
Thank you.
at 710.
Thank you.
Matt McDonald. I can't really add anything else to what everyone else has been saying. It's true, but I do think it's important for as many people as are here to reiterate that the lack of communication is quite upsetting and pretty stunning when for months you're asking questions. Reasonable questions, I think, and I've tried to be as, fact-based as I could in my questions, and they seem to be, should be able to get straightforward answers, but for months and months there's really been nothing. So it's very, very disappointing.
Any other public comment? Members of the council? Commissioner Stowski-Fugit.
Yes. I have a few things to say. For one, within the document, on page, I think it's 3, it discusses why the tower needs to be as high as it is. It discusses that we need to maintain a fall zone separation. And there are other FAQs with regard to DUCOM. The staff has absolutely reviewed every possible location that we could put it without compromising DUCOM, and so that we do not have this fall on a structure. I am unclear, based on the back and forth that we have all had, that beyond looking at all of the bullet points that we have put in this packet, what more we are supposed to look at without shutting down DUCOM, because we are necessary for the maintenance of EMS. It has to be a minimum of 183 feet in order for the DUCOM servers to function. I don't know what else we are supposed to say, knowing that staff has analyzed every possible option. After that coffee with the council, we all went back and discussed it with staff to see if there were any other options, and this was it. I did talk with a few real estate developers to kind of, or some real estate agents to get an idea for the concerns of real estate. And of course, there's nothing you can ever say definitive, right? It's all going to be hit or miss. But due to the fact that there's already a commercial property of fleet maintenance behind the homes and a cell tower within view, the real estate folks that I talked with suggested that it should not have it should have a negligible effect on the sale of a home. Now again, You can go to, X real estate person versus Y, and they can give you a different opinion. But I have spoken with people outside of council that have assured me that because there's already that property behind, that it's likely not to make as big of a difference with a resale of a home. And finally, a lot of the rhetoric that we've heard today is very accusatory, that we're somehow hiding behind something, or that we're all in cahoots with the mayor. Honestly, for anyone watching us up here or on social media or off the dais, the mayor and I have had plenty of disagreements, and I'm not just going to be a rubber stamp for him. But quite frankly, watching him be insulted when he just simply came forward to be mayor because he really does believe in the betterment of this village is really insulting. It is really insulting to have folks come up here week after week and suggest that you're beholden to developers or that all we care about is money. If you all want to go on public record, you can see what I purchased my home for, the fact that we still have student loans and I can only afford one kid. I'm not sitting up here on some high horse with tons of money trying to put more money in the pockets of developers. I'm here because I have to make an incredibly difficult decision for the whole community. And I know that in some projects, there are going to be some people that are going to be fine with it, and there are going to be some people that are upset. Do I ever want to make people upset or hurt them or make them feel as though they aren't welcome in this village? Of course I don't. But what we have to do is sit here and listen to the experts, listen to the community, have conversations with folks, and make the decision that we think is going to be in the best interest of everyone. That's what we're doing here, and that's what we did with Longfellow. And it doesn't mean that it feels good every time, and it doesn't mean that in my heart that is what I want to see, but it is my job to make decisions for the community as a whole. Now, I'm happy to have one-on-one conversations with anyone out here, and I have with some folks, and I'm willing to have even further. But this insistence that somehow we are a corrupt political machine is outrageous. We are community members. We are living in this community with you, and we don't want harm to come to this community either. We only stepped up because we care about our residents. And just because we don't agree does not mean we are not listening. It does not mean we're not taking it to heart, and it does not mean we don't want to have a conversation one-on-one with folks. I am sorry that there are some decisions that are challenging, but in long conversations that I have had with, again, real estate folks, community members, and staff, I don't see another option here to make sure that we don't lose our DUCOM services and that we are providing what we need for Wi-Fi with the remainder of the village, because if it doesn't go here, it's going to go in the middle of a residential neighborhood that doesn't have a fleet garage, and that might then do damage to our DUCOM system. So I just want to reiterate that I sit up here and I try and give everyone the benefit of the doubt and give everyone empathy, knowing that this is going to impact your life, and I'm not going to mock it or act as though this isn't a big deal. But we are asking that you please consider the same of us, and if you want to have a one-on-one conversation, please just schedule one with us. I would much rather have conversations with my community than just have anger building back and forth, because that's what we've been seeing escalating in these last 6 months. So please, if you want to talk to us, talk to us. But the way that we do business in these meetings is just that. There are Robert's Rules of Orders, and there are a way that it's not a conversation back and forth with the public. So if you want that, come to coffees with the council, meet us one-on-one, and we can go through in more detail for you all of the conversations that we had. But this anger is eating everyone up, and I just hope that we can come together a little bit more as a community and have these conversations without assuming the worst of one another.
I think it's great that you say that.
I'm sorry, we're, again, as Commissioner Sadowski-Fuga just said, it's not a back and forth debate with the community.
So see me after the meeting, and if you want to schedule a time, I will schedule a time with anybody in the audience right now.
Again, please, thank you. Anything else?
But like I said, we had sit-down meetings with staff, and we had sit-down meetings with other folks, and outside of this area, I just cannot see another option for DUCOM. That's it.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other public comment? I'm sorry, any other comments from the council? Commissioner Cullivaney.
Yeah, just quickly, I do mirror
Commissioner Sadowski's few gets comments. I'd also like to add that I did answer emails. I put my phone number there. They invited people to call me if they wanted to. I did not receive responses to those emails or people responding by giving me a call. So I think that's an inappropriate thing to say. Secondly, I did look at the petition that was out there, and what I noticed by omission, there was no statement that this was a relocation of an existing tower that's been there since the early 80s, and the cell phone capacity was added in 1988 and then expanded in 1993. And so there was no talk in that petition that this communication network is part of our police and fire operations. So it told only part of the story, and I'm sure it told the part of the story that was intended to inflame people as much as possible. So this is not a particularly difficult decision on the location of the tower, because we determined it's the only place on this property that the tower can go. It has to be hardwired to the police station. We don't have a reasonable alternative, and the decision to put Village Hall and the police station here was made years ago. It was continued in open discussions right in the committee room next door that every single person in this room was invited to attend, but for some reason you didn't attend. And it's disappointing to me because I sat in those seats starting in 2015. Pretty much every Tuesday night I was there paying attention, not particularly hard. You sit, you listen. If you're bored, you get on Facebook, you do something else. If it's something you're interested in, you can perk up and pay attention to it and then communicate with the people that are up here. So we have a responsibility to our police department to have smooth operations, and to our fire and EMS, and this part of the communication network is absolutely essential to do that. I would like to say that I'm pleased with the additional items that were put in the report by staff of putting both fencing around the base of the tower, and then also a privacy fence at the property line, and also arborvitae, which will grow up nice and tall as time goes on. So I think it shows that we were listening to your concerns, but as far as the idea of moving it somewhere else, we've not heard any other viable option than the option that we're voting on. So I intend to vote for this.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Gilmartin?
Thank you. First, I want to thank the village team for what Commissioner Calvani mentioned, addressing many of the recent questions and concerns expressed by some of the residents in regards to the tower relocation. I do appreciate the steps that are taken to keep the public informed, regardless, I think, of how some are characterizing it. I feel like there has been a strong response when asked. I also would like to thank Ms. Pasquale for calling me out specifically, only because engagement is part of the reason that I'm up here, and I participated in it with every email that was sent to me in regards to this. Conversations. The struggle that I have is in the first time this topic came to was brought to my attention, there was veiled threats of lawsuits starting at that first meeting. So when we talk about engagement, we have to think about the manner in which we want to engage and how that is characterized and what position that puts us as commissioners in. I do want to thank, though, the residents for your feedback, attending the various meetings, those who did reach out to me and had email conversations. I am always available and willing to talk, even if we don't agree or see eye to eye. I think based on what we are seeing in the most recent package, the village has been listening. Commissioner Calvani talked about the screening that has been proposed, something I support and I think was likely spurred by conversations. I think it's easy to evaluate this council on the 3 or 5 minutes we each speak on each topic, one time a meeting. But there is a lot that goes on behind the scenes. I know there's a ton of time spent on these issues. So despite what some may characterize, there is a lot of thought, a lot of feeling on how we might feel as neighbors, how we might feel as you who are potentially impacted by this. These are not decisions we take lightly. And I feel like the mischaracterization continues by those who wish to benefit individually. There have been 2 aspects about this tower that have been brought up, both safety and then the aesthetic and home value concerns. So I want to share a bit of my thoughts on both. From a safety standpoint, the placement of the pole in this new location provides significant safety to the village and beyond by providing the emergency response telecommunication for the 48,000 residents, including us up here, including you all, and beyond, providing those services. 911, emergency dispatch are vital functions to what our village provides. And having the tower on the site where the village operations and the police department sit simply makes sense. It's why the current tower is where it is. Hardwiring the tower to the EMS is required, and keeping those wires as short as possible affords us strong cable integrity. It likely shortens time for maintenance and repair and provides the system stability we all seek in these services. We've also been asked by residents to minimize the height of the tower by relocating the private leasers on the pole, the telecommunications providers like Verizon and AT&T that make our phones magic. While we know now that the removal of these private transmitters would not reduce the size of the tower with any real significance, it's important to remember that these private leasers also provide safety services in 2 ways. First, as more and more people get rid of their landlines, cell signal coverage and stability is critical when needing to make an emergency call from a cell phone. These privately owned transmitters are on that current tower and will be on the new tower as part of maintaining that service. And secondly, some of you may know about Smart 911, which allows emergency dispatchers to find your location when calling 911 from a mobile phone, which also leverages these private companies' mobile networks. More safety. The new location of the pole provides a safe fall zone to residents. The new pole is sturdier than the existing pole and rated to withstand the heaviest of storms, tornadoes, high winds. And as noted in the packet, this pole is stronger than the current tower. Now, I spent some time searching, a few hours, trying to find statistics on fall issues with towers like this, where radio communication towers have collapsed. And I'm not a researcher, but I spent as much time as I could and could not find a single case, of where a tower like this collapsed and caused harm or worse to anyone on the ground. In every single incident that I found, the injuries or worse came to those working on the tower exclusively. In summary, I think the likelihood of this tower collapsing and hurting someone not associated with the tower is highly, highly unlikely. In fact, overhead telephone poles and large trees, which are all over town in every neighborhood, pose a much greater threat. And for those who are concerned about 5G, we already have 5G transmitters, including on the current tower, and I have not seen any evidence to link this to a health risk. Now, the idea of the tower being moved off-site has been raised, but again, the proximity to the police station and the technical requirements just don't seem like it makes operational sense to me. Now, secondly, some who live adjacent to the current and the new tower have raised concerns about the view of the tower or the impact on home values. As it pertains to the view, there is already a tower on the village property that is nearly the same height. While the tower is moving a couple of 100 feet to the east, and I am certainly sympathetic to changes to anyone's view for any homeowner, I don't think this is a material change, and I believe it's a change that's in the best interest for the entire village. Second, the current tower base is 24 feet wide. The new tower base will only have a 7-foot wide base. So while the tower might be technically moving closer to some residents, the sightline mass of this tower, what it could and actually would be getting smaller as a visual footprint in your field of view at ground level and even above. And while it's getting 7 feet taller, technically, with a 9-foot antenna added, without the old tower next to it, I would be hard-pressed to find anyone who could really tell the difference in the height of the current and the new tower. Again, in the new package, the staff is proposing, and I support, 2 levels of screening, one at the base of the tower and one along the south lot, which will minimize ground level viewing as well, both in an effort to help screen the tower from those adjacent residents. And as it pertains to property values, I'll be the first to tell you I am by no means an expert in valuing homes. But I do believe that many of the statistics quoted about how a tower impacts home values are based on putting a new tower where there was no tower before, which is, I think, a different circumstance than what is being proposed, that we're moving a tower a couple 100 feet. But if we are to believe that a tower has an impact on property values adjacent to the village property, then I would contend that impact was felt over 40 years ago when the first tower was built. But I haven't seen any data that supports that then, nor have I seen any data that I believe would support the fact that it would impact that now, primarily because it's in essence a tower move and not a new tower. As noted in the package, nothing in this relocation prevents homeowners from improving their property. And finally, I believe what contributes to valuation or devaluation of a home is based on so many different factors. I think it would be very difficult, if not impossible, to single out the impact of the tower as a single reason for an impact on nearby homes. So, building a mandatory tower that replaces an older tower, that provides critical emergency telecommunication services, that is safer in design, that is 70% thinner, that is a bit taller, and is 200 feet from the original location, and now will be masked by 2 sets of screens, seems like a fairly straightforward decision to me. And I do plan to vote yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Walz.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I certainly don't want to repeat everything that my colleagues have already said because they've said it pretty well, very beautifully. What I do want to remind everyone of, and we have said this numerous times up here before, but I think it bears repeating, is that even though we at times do not agree, it does not mean that we are not listening. And what I noticed tonight during one of the public comments was that I was holding my breath. Because for many of us up here, the amount of time, thought, consideration, back and forth with ourselves in terms of making these decisions it's so immense that I can't even describe it to you. And I've said before on several other topics that these things keep me up at night. And I am so honest when I say that to you. We know that we are all in this together. We are community members, you are as well. Just because we sit up here doesn't make us any different from one another. And so when residents are upset, that upsets me. That upsets all of us up here. We obviously do not want to see members of our community unhappy with something that is happening. When we were approached at Coffee with the Council about this originally, I think all of us who were there immediately started asking questions of staff. And I was satisfied with the answers that they gave us. And I do feel like what we were told and what my fellow commissioners up here said tonight, that's what we have to work with. And is it ideal for the residents in this space? No. But for things that I'm not going to repeat, this is where this tower needs to be. But please do not for any minute think that these decisions do not affect us all personally, affect people in our personal lives who have to sit there while we stress and play amateur researcher and stay up at night, because it does. And we do care, even if we do not agree on a particular issue or topic. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Commissioner. I also don't want to repeat what's been said by my colleagues. Suffice it to say, excuse me, I think they've said it all very well. I agree that by moving a tower that currently exists, extending it roughly 16 feet, moving it 270 feet is eminently reasonable. It is in the best interests of the health, safety, and welfare of not just the people that live nearby, because it eliminates any fall risk, both to future construction and to current residents. But it also continues to permit the top level, literally in the top 1% of emergency response that we have here in Downers Grove. We're CALIA Gold certified and we're ISO Class 1, and there aren't a whole lot of communities that can say that. And you know, when it comes to emergency response, I mean, it's at the very essence of what we do as a community, and we have to protect that. And I know as well as anybody that seconds count. In a western suburb, I've talked about this before from the dais, but in a western suburb not that far from here, my father passed of a heart attack. They lost him in the ambulance on the way to the hospital. Seconds count, and we have every obligation to make sure that they continue to count and that we come through for as many residents as possible. So suffice to say that I believe the standards are met on the proposed tower. But I do want to take a moment to talk about some of the things we've heard tonight from the audience and from some of my colleagues. More and more, we get just anger-driven hyperbole from residents, and I get the anger. If in other situations, if I were sitting out there, I might be mad too. But things, the rhetoric that comes in many situations is just not only unproductive, it's counterproductive. And the attacks we've heard tonight on Mayor Barnett, I think, are particularly disgusting. Bob Barnett has served this village for quite a number of years. He's run for a seat up on this dais 4 different times and been successful each time. When I first was elected to the council, he and I really were not on good paper. We didn't see eye to eye on a whole lot, and we didn't trust each other. And we got to know each other over the years and found that we actually have an awful lot in common, despite the fact that we come from different ends of the ideological perspective on state and national issues. When it comes to local issues, we see things very similarly. And we grew not just a trust-filled working relationship, but a friendship. And the idea that we're moving this tower because it gets somewhat further away from Bob's house is ridiculous, and it's completely unsupported by the facts. We're moving it there because it's safer for the community. The idea that he's hiding or that we're doing his bidding is similarly ridiculous. You've got all kinds of different political persuasions up here on this dais from right to left. We agree or disagree on any number of issues, and we do it usually pretty civilly, and sometimes you might see a little bit of heat here and there, but we all work really well together. And that's a testament not just to the character of each of my colleagues, but to Bob as well, and his leadership. Now, the idea that we're in the pockets of developers, when we run for office, you have to make campaign finance disclosures. All of it's public. I have taken precisely $0 from developers. And I'm willing to bet that the same is true of all of my colleagues. In fact, one of the things that's in the bid packet that's provided to all of us when it comes time to vote on a contract is a political disclosure. And in 8.5, almost 9 years up here, I have seen one time the name of somebody I recognized on that disclosure. It was a candidate who didn't win. I have never seen one of my colleagues' names on any of those disclosures. Not once. So the idea that we're somehow in the pocket of anybody is completely unsupportable. I'll leave the rest of it out. Yeah, I think that's enough. Rosa, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Wallace?
Aye.
Commissioner Sadowski-Fugit?
Aye.
Commissioner Glover?
Aye.
Commissioner Gilmartin?
Aye.
Commissioner Colavani?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Jose?
Aye. That matter passes unanimously. That brings us to item F. May I have a motion?
Mayor Pro Tem, I move to adopt an ordinance approving a tax increment redevelopment plan and redevelopment project for the Washington and Curtis Street redevelopment project area as presented.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded. Is there any public comment?
Yes. Again, Matthew Klepper. The issue that only one of you even addressed is whether you think it's okay for the mayor to be publicly advocating for a proposal that benefits himself without disclosure, right? Those of us that are his neighbors knew as soon as we saw the cell phone tower relocation that it was going to help him. I doubt if the rest of Downers Grove knows where he lives. I see Bob and his wife walking his dog just about every day when my wife and I are walking our dog. We supported his election, right? But what happened here, you know, for Commissioner Jose to say, oh, you can't possibly say that we're doing this just to help the mayor. Really? Because from the facts, to use your favorite term, Commissioner Jose, are really simple. You're moving it 270 feet away from his house and towards mine and my neighbors. And with all due respect to Commissioner Gilmartin, and I do appreciate it, I've seen you at least communicate with my neighbor, Sarah, and some others. 270 feet is not nothing. As to sightlines, come sit in my backyard now, and then come back when this new cell tower is here, and you'll see what a difference 270 feet makes. But I'm not going to belabor this point. There were, the notion of veiled lawsuits. I showed up at coffee with the council because I understood that was an opportunity to engage. What I said there is, this is the legislative process. We want to work it out in the legislative process. After that, there might be a judicial process. If you all really think that a comment like that means, oh, we're just going to refuse to engage and go into our turtle shell and pass whatever's in front of us, then we have serious problems. I couldn't have been more sincere when I said, look, let's try to work this out. And we got nothing. My neighbor said the olive branch is the landscaping. It's not an olive branch, it's an insult. It was legally required from the beginning. There's no ambiguity about that. There was nothing in there. We raised it, they put it in there. That isn't engagement, that isn't communication, that isn't working collaboratively with the residents to try to solve a problem. That's not doing your job in the first place, and then when being called out on it, oh, we'll put some landscaping in there. And the notion that this is the only place this tower can go boils down to you all saying, the village staff hired consultants who knew what they were talking about, and they tell us this is the only place. Well, first of all, that may be true. But what we asked for and didn't get is direct engagement with those staff people and perhaps even those consultants. I don't know. I'm not trained in these fields. I can tell you that for sure it's not the only place. You don't have to configure this property the way it's configured. You could put City Hall on a different end. You can put the police station differently. You all are starting from the assumption that this plan, as far as where the structures are going to be there. And then you're saying, with that preconception, the tower has to be here. If you start to play with those preconceptions, then all of a sudden the tower doesn't have to be. And the notion that this tower isn't going to fall, I think that's likely, although it didn't take me long on Google while you were talking, Commissioner Gilmartin, to find pretty terrifying videos of cell phone towers collapsing. And guess what? If this cell phone tower collapses, it doesn't fall in my yard. If the new one does, it does. Now, I tend to agree with you. It's probably unlikely that this cell phone tower will collapse. But if you're so confident of that, put it on top of the police station. That's one solution. You got a really short cable. But the thing I would close with is the one thing that none of you have even expressed a position on, except for Mr. Jose, is do you think it's okay for the mayor to be out on Facebook publicly supporting a proposal that personally benefits himself? Is that okay in your view of judicial ethics, legislative ethics, executive ethics? Pick your branch. I would be very interested to each one of you comment on whether you think that was acceptable. If the mayor were here, perhaps he could comment, but he chose not to attend. Thank you.
So not associated with this motion, but I did want to follow up. We were asking for direct contact with the Planning Commission after the open house, and said that it was going to be granted, and then it was taken away. We reached out to you guys via email. A few responded with company line, and that's what we had. And I think in the Planning Commission meeting, my neighbor, Mr. Stark, actually asked, how do we make this happen? How do we have these face-to-faces? And no one had an answer for us. And the one line that we had with Mr. Baker got shut down, so that's where we were at. So then in regard to the petition, at that time, that's the information that we had, because we were asking for more detail, and it was not provided. And not up until probably a week ago did we get the detail that we've been asking for the last month and a half. So that's where we were at, and hopefully the next issue is a little bit smoother and you guys engage with the public better. And we will do our best as well.
Thank you.
Marshall Schmidt. What I've heard tonight is in line with what has been said at other council meetings about anger and accusations and deep felt distress over the decisions that you need to make. And all I can say to that is you can deny and argue that you're troubled by all of this and troubled by the anger. But if you look at your actions, those actions speak louder than your protestations. They speak louder than your denials. With regard to anger, what you should be asking is, why is this group of normally very collegial neighbors suddenly angry? I served 8 years on the school board and loved every minute of it, and loved working with people on that board and working with people in the community. When we saw anger in the community, we didn't say, oh my gosh, you guys are so angry. Oh, you shouldn't be angry. Don't be angry. Don't be angry. What we asked is why? Why are people so angry? You're not asking that question. You're laying it off on the people who are angry and saying it's their fault. With engagement goes taking responsibility for your actions. You all decided to run for the village council. And this can't be pleasant. It can't be pleasant for a group of intelligent people who are very community-minded coming up here and meeting after meeting, pounding you and pounding the mayor for what you're doing. But no one's asking the question, why? Why is that happening? What should we be doing to avoid that anger? No. It's accusations. Oh, the anger's bad. You're escalating. You're raising the rhetoric. Again, you're not asking the questions. Why is the rhetoric escalating? The rhetoric is escalating out of frustration from inaction and a lack of engagement and a lack of asking the question, why? The vision of this village council is that when they're threatened by questions, by differences of opinion, they hunker down. They go into bunker mentality. Oh, we don't want to meet with a group. We don't want to meet with a group of the public because they may ask hard questions and we may not have exact answers for them. No, what you do is 5 minutes. 5 minutes, you go over a second over 5 minutes, you get cut off. You wait until everyone's done, and then you state your positions. You get an email, then you share it with everyone, which is what happened with Longfellow. We asked for a meeting with some commissioners, and what we got back were 2 emails from different commissioners that were almost word for word identical, saying there will be no public hearing on Longfellow. There will be no public meeting on Longfellow. The bunker mentality. That's what we've seen with Longfellow. That's what we've seen with this cell tower. And I submit that that is not engagement. That is not good government. That is something that needs to change. And if this village council can't ask those questions and take the actions that are necessary to create engagement, to reduce the anger, to reduce the level of rhetoric, then this village council needs to go.
Thank you. Any other public comment? So I had been going to my colleagues first, but I'm going to open this one. So there's no level of engagement on this topic of where the telecommunications tower would be that would change the determination of this council. There's no level of engagement that would have changed the determination on Longfellow. Those votes were unanimous. So the fact that the engagement wasn't perhaps what you were looking for, I apologize for that. But we ran our process exactly as we normally run our process. We had public hearings at the Plan Commission. We had public hearings here. We had comments at Coffee with the Council. And by the way, the Coffee with the Council, and I'll let my colleagues weigh in if they feel like it, and if they don't, God bless. But, Mr. Klepper, we got your legal resume, that you work at the 3rd largest law firm in the world, that you're in real estate development, and you started talking about, being able to hire expert witnesses somewhere in the first 3 to 5 minutes of the conversation. So
That was a different conversation.
it's the only one I've been a part of.
Was it with me?
I guarantee it was, and I've got plenty of witnesses to back it up. So what's changed isn't our process. What's changed isn't when we give our thoughts on when we decide to, or when we've made up our minds and we are actually telling you where we are on a particular issue. What's changed is getting a litigation threat right out of the box. What's changed is references to the Soviet Politburo or 60s Chicago. I mean, really? I just don't understand where that kind of rhetoric comes from, and it's certainly not going to foster the kind of engagement that you're looking for. So, could we do better? Yeah. Could you? Yeah. A conversation is a two-way street. So if you'd like to have more of those conversations, let's have them, but can we do it civilly? We like to talk about being, tough on issues and easy on people. We've been plenty tough on issues, but there's been a lot of toughness on people in addition to that. And, I wouldn't say that, I'll go ahead and say I'm guilty of that too. So, any thoughts from my colleagues? Commissioner Sadowski-Fugit.
Yeah, just to follow up on that, for a lot of us, some of those responses were due to the threat of litigation, and if I can be honest, I don't want to be the reason that I cost taxpayers a giant lawsuit because I somehow said something that was completely inaccurate that I didn't fully understand. So there is a really big difference with community engagement when there's a threat of a lawsuit versus when there's not. And so part of what we have to do for doing the best for our community is also taking that into consideration. And so even when it's a small comment made, we still, in the back of our minds, are thinking about, man, we don't want to be the next lawsuit. We don't want to be the next person that costs our taxpayers money for a policy that we feel very comfortable with based on the conversations that we've had with staff. Again, we aren't trying to minimize the frustration. All we're doing when we're speaking up here is kind of trying to explain how the process went. And I agree with Commissioner Jose that all of us up here are going to seek to do better, and we hope that the full community does as well. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Commissioner Cullivan.
Yeah, we do have a process. The time for us to be able to discuss things open is in the first reading, because it's the only opportunity we have to talk to more than one other person, and that's governed by the Open Meetings Act. So we can have a conversation with any other commissioner on here, but we can't get 2 commissioners on the phone, let alone another 6 commissioners, and that's based on the laws. So if it seems like that communication gets stilted, that's the reason for that. It's very frustrating, particularly on a weekend, when we have to make 6 different phone calls, perhaps a number of different times, but that's on us, that's part of the process. Regarding the Plan Commission not being able to comment, they are only allowed to take input during the public hearing. And the public hearing that goes in the Plan Commission is actually part of the legal structure of what's going on. And they are simply precluded by law to take ex parte communications. They can't take it before the meeting. They can't take it after the meeting. The only time that they can take it is during the public comments part of the public hearing, and when the chair of the Plan Commission closes public hearing, that means the public's time to talk is over, and then it's time for the Plan Commission to deliberate it. And the reason they do that is that the petitioner comes, and anyone who's saying things either for or against, and particularly against the petitioner has the right to hear that and answer that. They can't have the scenario where, I had a phone conversation with the chairman of the Plan Commission. I think I convinced him not to go along with this thing. They simply can't do that. So that was the reason. If it came across as lack of communication, that's the reason for that. When someone shows up at a meeting, says, I'm a lawyer, I get paid hundreds of dollars an hour to argue and to prove my point, and we could very well sue you over this issue. It stifles the communication. So we as a group have to be very careful in the way we communicate. So we have to make sure everything is factual, and if it's because, if you got the same information from more than one person, it's because we wanted to make sure that everything we said is factual. And I work very hard with my communications to make sure I'm accurate. There are times where a single email will take me 2 hours, because I want to do the research, I want to talk to staff, I want to get the answers, I want to make sure that the things I'm putting in there as attachments are accurate. I want to make sure that the information, particularly when someone says that, if this doesn't go my way, I'm going to sue you. Not coming to a meeting and say, hey, we have this issue, we'd really like to discuss it with you. So if you're frustrated with the lack of discourse, that's part of the reason. This part of the meeting is where it's an active agenda item. We've had our workshop, we've had our full discussions. We have even more open discussions when we go to the committee room, and we're throwing it back and forth, between the public and ourselves, because it's a workshop kind of meeting. This is the process we follow. You get your turn to talk, we get our turn to talk. If you don't like that, come to the governance meeting and come with better ideas that can convince 7 of us that that's the way we should operate our meetings. There's also things that we're governed by municipal code in the way we operate. So we don't do things just because, we do things because we do have a process. I don't carry water for the mayor, but I did get an email from him at 8:40 a.m. Said, Rich, I've got an event at DGN, meets at Downers Grove North, this evening, and I'm not certain about the timing, but I may be late to tonight's meeting. Would you please check the audience at the beginning of the meeting and let Greg know if you see George Kapinski from Precision Circuits in attendance. So I responded to him, yes, I'll do that. Spoke to George on the way in. So the mayor is not at some simple birthday thing that he'd be able to change to move to Sunday afternoon. He's at a Downers Grove North event, which he does not have the power to change. And I intend to vote in favor of this item.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Gilmar.
Yeah, just a couple more things. I think I want to go on record to say I don't think Mayor Barnett had a master plan to redesign the entire police station, Village Hall, to move a communication tower out of line of sight of his house. I think that's absolutely preposterous and insulting to his career as a member of this village. I also think in terms of the engagement, I do think that there has been a lot of engagement on a lot of different topics that we've brought up tonight, Longfellow, and here with the tower and many other things. Again, it's not as visible because these meetings are so formal, but I would just encourage certainly anybody here, anybody watching, that the idea that we have these very hyper-intensive, short, compressed discussion periods just when we're sitting up here is just a complete misunderstanding. And I only know that because I had the same misunderstanding a year ago before I was sitting up here. And I think that it was raised, I think, about the anger and thinking about always what the root of the anger is. And I do think this council does look to that when we're asked to meet with folks and we get complaints about maybe canned answers or not being engaging. I think most of the time is we're learning too. We're learning from you what the concerns are. It's our role as elected representatives to come back and be that conduit with the village. I can certainly speak for myself. I feel I've worked hard to do that. I don't have all the answers, and a lot of times I have answers that people aren't going to like. That's part of the job. That's why I signed up for it. So I don't want to get on my soapbox about that, but I do think it's important. And the last thing I'll say is, if we're looking to keep the anger out, let's not bring bricks to village council meetings, right? Let's not charge and make false accusations about decisions that we make. That doesn't help anybody. You're wondering why this commission or why this village council is struggling so hard to communicate with you folks. People show up with bricks to our meetings. What does that do for engagement? Thank you.
Thank you. Please, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I'd also like to go on the record and say that I do not believe that anything that happened this evening was to benefit our mayor. I think that is incredibly unfair. I think for those of you in the community who know us, you know deep down that that is not true. Something like that would never fly on this council or with this staff. And I think it's unfortunate that given he is prioritizing his family, that he is being portrayed in this manner here tonight. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Commissioner. Yeah, so when it comes to the structure of the facilities project, it's structured the way it is because it makes the most sense for the most people in the village. We're building the new facility in the location we are so that we can continue to use this facility and the police station right up until we can move into the new building. And Mayor Barnett supported any number of other facilities projects that were structured differently. So have I, so have several people that are up here on the council with me and prior councils. As I've said ad nauseum, there have been probably 7 or 8 different projects that were proposed, and this is the one that's finally going to pass since I've been up here, and there were several before I ever was elected. We're passing the one that makes sense now. And now for something completely different. Since we're actually supposed to be talking about a tax increment redevelopment plan, I'd just like to say that the TIF district creation, I think, is the right thing for the village. It maximizes our revenues and it allows us to pay for the facility without moving forward with a property tax increase. I think it makes perfect sense for everyone in the village. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Wallace?
Aye.
Commissioner Sadowski-Fugit?
Aye.
Commissioner Glover?
Aye.
Commissioner Gilmartin?
Aye.
Commissioner Colavani?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Jose?
Aye. That matter passes unanimously. May I have a motion with regard to item G?
Mayor Pro Tem, I move to adopt an ordinance designating the Washington and Curtis Street redevelopment project area pursuant to the Tax Increment Allocation Redevelopment Act as presented.
Second.
Any public comment?
Just briefly, okay? I mean, this does have to do with how this village council functions. Again, Matt Klepper, unfortunately up here for the third time. Some of you, I can't remember how many of you were there at the Coffee of the Council. I can say with 100% certainty that I have never in my life said that I work at the third largest law firm in the world. I have no idea if that's true. I take it that Mr. Jose exercised his own Google skills to find that out. It may be true. But that and some of the other characterizations of that conversation were inaccurate. They were self-serving. You all were trying to make a case. I came to you in a very friendly fashion to say, look, this is the legislative process. We want to work this out. Did I mention that I was a lawyer who understood the judicial process? Yes, because it's relevant. You all should be making decisions based on what that judicial process will look like. Everything you do is the threat of a lawsuit. Every single decision you make. And if what you're saying is, if there's a possibility of a lawsuit, then we go into our bunker mentality and we're not going to talk to people and we're not going to consider anything, then we've got even bigger problems. But the characterizations of my conversation with you all, which again, the only one of you that I have ever spoken to my knowledge in the past, was the mayor, because he lives, whatever it is, a half a dozen doors down from me. Never spoken with any of you. I came with good intentions and assuming the best. And I tried to express that to you as clearly as I could. And you can furrow your brow all you want to, Commissioner Sadowski. That's the truth. All right, so when you all then make ad hominem attacks on me, a village resident, why am I angry? Because you all are tearing up your own zoning ordinances in a way that I don't think makes any sense. It certainly does harm to me and my neighbors. I don't think that's up for dispute. And just finally, on the conflict. It may be that this cell phone tower is not being moved in order to benefit Bob Barnett, but it does. It's that appearance of impropriety that Mr. Schmidt referenced. And those facts are undisputed, and Commissioner Jose, you can say it's preposterous or ridiculous all you want to, but the facts are really simple. He supported this project on Facebook and otherwise, all right, publicly. The project entails moving the tower 270 feet away from his house, thereby benefiting him. Undisputed, cannot argue with that fact. All right, now it may be that that's not the motivation. I don't know, okay? But those are the facts. I came here last week and said to his face, recuse yourself, like address it. There was nothing behind the back. We weren't throwing bricks. It was, look, this is a fact. You're benefiting from this proposal and you're advocating for it. He said nothing. Today, his chair is empty. I don't know what he thinks about it. But to accuse me of somehow thwarting this process is as unfair a characterization of that conversation as I could imagine. Because I was hoping we could work something out. I was hoping we wouldn't get to the judicial level. And I still hope that. There's opportunities to work through this. But I just see absolutely no willingness, to use the favorite word of the night, to engage with us on any of these points. So, thank you again for your time.
Marshall Schmidt. So basic principles of argument have two techniques that were on display tonight. One is blame the victim, and the other is play the victim. And in both cases, this village council has done a wonderful job of doing that, claiming that they've been threatened, so they have to protect themselves, that falsehoods are being lobbed at them. No one in all of these discussions has undertaken a discussion of the merits. When that discussion took place, when there was engagement and a back and forth, before the Planning Commission voted unanimously against the zoning ordinance. Here, the result was different in the Planning Commission, but again, I don't see that there was any engagement in the wake of that or before that. With regard to the mayor, no one is saying that the reason you're voting for this is to benefit the mayor. But that's not how conflicts of interest work. For people to have confidence in the integrity of government, there can't even be the appearance of an impropriety. There has to be full disclosure, and when someone has a conflict, they need to recuse themselves. So that you don't have to go through the exercise you're going through tonight, which is, oh no, we're not doing this for the mayor. We're not doing it for this, and this doesn't benefit the mayor, and for all of these reasons, that's not why we're doing it. That's why you have recusal. That's why people recuse themselves, so that you eliminate that appearance of impropriety. But here the mayor chose to not say anything, to advocate for the project, and then to not appear when the votes were going to be taken. And sure, maybe he had a conflict tonight, but the village council has control of the agenda, as they demonstrated at the beginning of this meeting. All of these ordinances could have been put off for a week when the mayor was here, and he could say, okay, on this one I'm not voting because I have a conflict of interest. He chose not to do that. He chose to go forward with this agenda. And I won't repeat Mr. Klepper's point about threatened litigation. You're public officials. Every act you take has the potential for someone to sue you. That goes with the territory. Again, you're not a victim. You're not suddenly, oh gee, we're threatened because someone uses a brick for a rhetorical device to make a point. You're not threatened. You're public officials. That comes with the territory. I'd like to address the misrepresentation of the Open Meetings Act. There is nothing in the Open Meetings Act that prohibits a body like this from engaging in a conversation and a give and take. What the Open Meetings Act prevents is more than two commissioners meeting in secret, not in the public eye. But everything that I've been advocating for tonight is for a public meeting where the entire council comes together and there is a discussion amongst the council, which is perfectly appropriate. The meeting has to be noticed. The public has to know the meeting is going to take place. But there's nothing in the Open Meetings Act that prevents you from doing that. You have again and again and again refused to do it because you're in a bunker mentality, because you're playing victim, because you think you've been threatened, and you can use that as an excuse. You can hide behind that as an excuse to engage in a meaningful discussion. There are emails, there are a million ways that we can communicate with the council, and the mayor at the beginning of every meeting goes down the list. Okay, but that is not meaningful discussion. That is you taking in information, figuring out how you're going to respond. And if you think that we believe that you don't have some type of communication to reconcile your answers in certain cases, then you think we must be, dumber than we look. Okay? I know how this works. When I was on the school council, or the school district, when we had an issue that engendered anger in the community, you know what we did? And the best example of this was when Puffer was absorbed into the district. Okay? We had a public hearing where people asked questions and the board members got to respond. Where is that here? So let me end with this. As I said before, the process is broken. Several of the members relied on the process. You followed the process. The process allows you to hide behind that process if you want to. And that's what's happened here. The process is broken. And yes, can everyone do better? Maybe. But, I too came to this village council at the very beginning of the Longfellow discussion and at the coffee with the council with a pledge to work cooperatively. And the reason at the coffee with the council, ever since I pointed out what the village ordinance said about zoning, the bunker mentality set in. And from that time, there has been no engagement. And so, yeah, can we do better? But for Longfellow and for people who are going to live in the shadow of this new tower, it's too late. We're going to be suffering with the consequences of those tough decisions that you work so hard for. Okay? We're going to be suffering. You aren't going to be suffering from that. You're not going to be hearing that noise. So the process is broken. You have to fix it.
Hi. How are you doing? It's interesting that we're talking about cities, villages, people following rules and regulations. I apologize for being late, but I have something really heavy on my mind.
Jim, can I hang on a second? Are you looking to talk about anything related to the facilities project?
Yes.
All right, we're on the facilities project, so if you
Yes.
would keep it to that, please.
I could put a spin on anything. Okay? Mr. Marshall, I apologize, but I've been unofficially, officially involved in politics. And on facility projects, any projects, it involves the community. Okay, it involves the involvement of the community. Okay? There are pros and cons, and there's a balance. Okay? And there's rules and regulations. Okay? Since I was just called out by Greg to make sure I step on and don't go into other projects. But I'm sorry, I'm a newcomer. But I'm dealing with rules and regulations that I'm becoming a victim. And I could advocate for anything, pro and con.
Again,
but let me finish.
We haven't gotten
Let
to,
me finish.
hang on, Jim.
Let me finish.
We haven't gotten to public comment yet, so if you'd like to talk about something more
Let me
general.
finish. This is addressed to
Jim,
what Mr.
can you give me
Marshall
1
said.
second, please?
This is addressed
Jim,
to Mr. Marshall.
Can you
Take
give me a
1
second? Just stop for a second. Just stop for a second.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay? If you want to talk about anything other than facilities, which it seems like you are, I need you to wait until a little later in the meeting. We haven't gotten to the general public comment yet.
Well, facilities.
If you're looking to talk about,
Facilities.
if you're looking, can I finish?
Everybody has rules
Jim,
and regulations.
hey.
It's about facilities.
Please,
Everybody has rules
Jim.
and regulations.
stop,
You're,
please.
you're,
Jim,
man, you're
come on.
people behind you need to follow the rules and regulations and not manipulate.
Jim,
Because you know what? Victim goes all across the board.
Mayor Pro Tem, could I ask you to remind the audience what item we're speaking on?
thank you, Commissioner Cullivaney. We're talking about an ordinance to designate the Washington and Curtis Street redevelopment project area pursuant to the Tax Increment Allocation Redevelopment Act. As I tried to say about 14 times, Jim, we haven't gotten to general public comment yet. I know that you've got things you want to talk about, and we're happy to talk about them then.
No, I'm talking about.
Thank you, that's the end of the discussion. Is there any other public
I
comment?
basically politely sat down.
Is there any other public comment?
We're on item G.
Yes, we're on item G. All right. Any comments from the council? I can tell you I'm not going to have any.
No.
I think I've said enough. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Wallace?
Aye.
Commissioner Sadowski Fugit?
Aye.
Commissioner Glover?
Aye.
Commissioner Gilmartin?
Aye.
Commissioner Cullivaney?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Jose?
Aye, that matter passes unanimously. Can I get a motion with regard to item H, please?
Mayor Pro Tem, I move to adopt an ordinance adopting tax increment allocation financing for the Washington and Curtis Street redevelopment project area as presented.
Second.
Any public comment?
David Rose. Let me take the news story approach and start out with the punchline and then elaborate. Quoting from my comments last week, in Illinois, government officials tend to solve current financial woes by crafting on a continuously rolling basis solutions culminating 20 to 30 years into the future, aka kick the can down the road, and do their best to avoid disclosing financial information or data of any sort detrimental to their preferred course of action. Nevertheless, I'll say again, with taxes already committed to District 99 and the tax increases District 58 is seeking, and the additional revenue council needs to meet pension obligations over the coming 20 years, as well as other potential structural needs, unless council provides scenarios contrasting the ramifications of TIF success to TIF failure in this larger context, taxpayers have no idea what they're in store for. The latter is the key specific point which you failed to address in concrete fashion. One other pertinent aspect I neglected to mention last time, though I've mentioned it before. Officials at lower levels of government take credit for apparent budgetary success, even when the success is an illusion, because it results from debt created by a higher level of government. Such new debt puts off in time and displaces to a different level of government when and to whom the debt will be paid, presuming, of course, the debt can be repaid. Council's sparkling bond rating is a manifestation of this phenomenon. Illinois' bond rating is junk, and while the federal government's bond rating is not junk, its rating is less a function of accurate financial analysis and more the result of the nation's presumed political economic power going forward and the acquiescent attitude of rating agencies. The last decade and a half, and especially the recent pandemic years, have seen the well-off portion of the population benefit as primary recipients of the trillions of debt-created money dispersed to both public and private entities at the local level. That money is the sole reason for the surprisingly better financial conditions local taxing bodies in Downers Grove report than they otherwise expected. That appearance of seemingly good health is what is now being shattered by economic realities. Why do I mention all this? Because while a TIF is, if nothing else, an attempt to hide the impact of incurring new debt from taxpayers, taxpayers are ultimately responsible for the debt, as our esteemed mayor vaguely acknowledged last week. No one has a crystal ball, but trust us, we believe this TIF is the best course of action, he basically said. The TIF is an attempt, as was said here tonight, to avoid raising property taxes. Fine, but as I noted earlier, Council and District 58 are in catch-up mode, and their timing could not be worse. And a TIF doesn't really avoid raising taxes as much as it tries to shift who pays which tax and when. During the presentation last week, our esteemed mayor paused to make sure slides of dates and broadly phrased bullet points were visible. Did the presentation include any slide showing the proposed financing and its timing? Not that I noticed. Does any of the background information our esteemed mayor encouraged residents to examine speak to the specific questions Mr. Olson raised, or the general question I raised of what best course means in concrete financial terms? If the information exists, it should have been a simple matter for council or staff to include in the presentation. Show the various aspects of the proposed financing, point Mr. Olson or any interested party to the scenarios council examined. Answer Olson's direct question, what's the backup plan if the TIF bumps into problems? Has council even thought about backup plans? To repeat, the TIFs about which the mayor-in-waiting and others are so proud benefited enormously from the trillions of debt the nation has incurred over the past 2 decades. Current indications are that the flow of that largesse is about to reverse, perhaps quite rapidly. I brought up the subject of pensions and other structural obligations because they overlap the proposed TIF, as does the bond District 58 is considering. The size of the pension obligation is expected to grow because the requirement to reach full 100% funding. The size of obligations will also likely grow should the rate of return on investment fall, which also seems likely. Absent scenarios that allow taxpayers to get a sense of what may lie ahead regarding this and other foreseeable expenses, Council offers little beyond empty words of assurance. Unless the point be missed, my continuing emphasis on environmental sustainability arises from the unavoidable reality that unless one believes in growth without limits, either one has to learn to live within limits or one commits to intensifying the exploitation of those less powerful in order to maintain one's extant standard of living. I've yet to hear anyone in council acknowledge that reality, which by default means council remains committed to its present path of intensified exploitation, implicit in its relentless pursuit of rising property prices. How else can it afford to pay for the new facility?
Thank you.
Forum?
If you're talking about the TIF on the facilities project, then yes.
No, I'll wait.
Any other comments? Members of the council? Commissioner Colvin.
Yeah, I agree with this method of financing, and the other taxing bodies also agree to that. It gives us a way to finance this and to pay it off with future tax revenue that would be collected with the apartment building going in, which, if memory serves, would be where the existing tower is. So those two things are incompatible. This village has had a good result with our TIF. The most significant one was recently retired. It was for our downtown tax incremental financing. We also are doing well with our Ogden Avenue TIF and with other TIFs, so we do have the history to look back on. If the TIF fails, then it's on the taxpayers, and that's your responsibility. So that's why we try to make decisions here that in the best interest of making sure the TIF will not fail by having the best possible development and creating a nice atmosphere for people to move to Downers Grove, for businesses to move to Downers Grove, and yes, their property value is going up, because I know a lot of people rely on those property values, perhaps for their very retirement or their survival in old age. So I think it's a good vehicle that's available to us, and I agree with this, and I'll be voting in favor of this.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other comments from the council? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Commissioner Wallace?
Aye.
Commissioner Sadowski-Fugit?
Aye.
Commissioner Glover?
Aye.
Commissioner Gilmartin?
Aye.
Commissioner Colavani?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Jose?
Aye, that matter passes unanimously. That concludes the active agenda. We have no first reading agenda. I'll throw it to Manager Fieldman for the manager's report.
No manager's report tonight, Mayor Pro Tem. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fieldman. At this point, I'm going to jump back to the beginning of the agenda. Unfortunately, the mayor is not here. We have one proclamation tonight about National Bike Month. Whereas National Bike Month was established in 1956 and serves as an annual opportunity to showcase the many benefits of bicycling and encourage more folks to giving biking a try. And whereas the Downers Grove Bicycle Club works year-round promoting the joys and benefits of bicycling in Downers Grove and throughout the area. And whereas throughout the month of May, the residents of Downers Grove are invited to join in Bike to Work Week, May 16th through 22nd. The Downers Grove Bike Club's participation in the annual Ride of Silence on May 18th, honoring cyclists injured or killed while riding, and Bike to Work Day on Friday, May the 20th. And whereas Downers Grove Quiet Streets attract bicyclists each year, providing an economical, healthy, convenient, and environmentally sound form of transportation, and an excellent tool for recreation and enjoyment of Downers Grove's beauty. And whereas cycling's low-impact form of exercise can help protect riders from stroke, heart attack, depression, diabetes, obesity, and arthritis. And whereas creating a bicycling-friendly community has been shown to improve citizens' health, well-being, and quality of life, to boost community spirit, to improve traffic safety, and to reduce pollution and congestion, and growing the economy of Downers Grove. And whereas Downers Grove's quiet streets attract bicyclists each year, providing economic, health, transportation, and scenic benefits. Now therefore, Robert T. Barnett, Mayor of the Village of Downers Grove, does hereby proclaim May 2022 as National Bike Month in the Village of Downers Grove, and urges all residents to join in seeking opportunities to ride and in enjoying this special observance of biking in our community. Dated this 10th day of May 2022 in Downers Grove, Illinois. That'll bring us to what was originally item 5. This is public comment. If there are any public comments on items that did not appear on our active agenda or consent agenda tonight, the floor is yours. We ask you to keep the comments to 5 minutes or less.
Hi, guys. I apologize, Greg. But
No problem.
I do have some major problems going on. I have a tendency to get over emotional about something I fell in love with. I fell in love with this town, and the more I see things in this town, the more I want to get involved with this town. We can start from good or we can start from ugly, okay? Or we can start from personal. I'm not trying to be a thorn in this side, but you know what? I walked away from other towns, and I walked away from a lot of money. I've been offered a lot of money. I was offered $20,000 to see my publishing company Downers Grove. My first newspaper is going to be Celebrating News, Downers Grove. I got one problem that's basically bothering me. I just got out of the hospital. I'm not looking for pity. I have a blood clot in my heart. I turn around, I'm on the blue crashing because I have erratic sleeping hours, and I get a knock on the door. It's a delivery. It's like, oh, I'm not dressed. Just leave it at the door. It's a summons for 5312 to appear in court. I've got lawyers. I got way too many lawyers. I collect more than jelly beans. Okay? They asked me to do stuff they're afraid to do because they got to be careful. Okay? Reach and distance, all that, I was doing really well. It was a summons to appear in court for 5312. My slumlord had basically sent me a nasty text, said Irish are unhonest, unworthy, and untrusting. After I got rid of equipment that's been sitting here since 1995, off and on, I was having strokes and having mental meltdowns. I turned around and helped him try to figure out how to get the place in order. I tore up a bathroom. Your guy that you just gave an award to, that basically says, you know, building safety, this, that. He asked me, did you have permission to tear up that bathroom? Come on, that's a stupid, idiotic comment. I had permission. I actually was encouraged and pushed to do it more and more and more. No, it was pushed to cover up mold that collected over 15 years that I have documented by a contractor. I gave it to the building department. You know what I got in return? A threatening letter from your building department because I had to apply for occupancy permit. Okay, now we're going to court. I love my day in court. I've been in court a lot. Advocate, pro and cons. Could put a spin on everything. Mr. Marshall, I appreciate you basically coming up here and speaking for the people that you protect their interests, but we all have interests, okay? We all have things that we all have agendas. We all have to think about what everybody else's agenda is and what the end result is, okay? The place was a fire hazard. Nobody inspected it. I took pictures and documented it. It was a fire trap. There was stuff stacked up to here in the hallway, okay? But you know what? The building department sent me a letter saying if you don't get your application in, you're going to be fined every day. I got lawyers. I teased my lawyers. I said, you guys are great. I'm like a city. You know, I got unlimited lawyers. Is it in the city's best interest to have light? The grass is up to here right now, okay? The building has aluminum falling off of it. The paint chips, the windows, everything's falling apart of it. There's potential construction of fall, but your building department guy got awarded for safety. And you guys still haven't found a way to go in the building and violate the guy? Oh, because you know what? I'm the victim. Trust me, I'm not a victim. Okay? I'm not trying to make anybody else a victim. But even the little guy that's struggling to get back on his feet has rights. And we all have to understand is, who knows, maybe Mr. Marshall will run for mayor next term. Maybe Greg will. Danny, you got a kid, beautiful kid. I love your Facebook account. You don't want to run for mayor because the mayor right now is doing a wonderful thing tonight. He's involved with family. And we're all supposed to be family. No matter if we're blood related or not, we're all family of this community.
You're a little over 5 minutes. Thanks. Thank you. Thank you for raising the issues. If there are code violations, obviously we'll look into them. Thank you. Any other comments of a general nature?
David Rose again. Last week, this week, and recent council meetings exposed what have been troubling features of council for several years now. Council doesn't do policy, doesn't plan in any demonstrably effective way, doesn't enforce ordinances and regulations if enforcement is inconvenient or expensive. Its key decisions are often as not taken in the absence of or in spite of data. And in something of a chicken-egg underpinning, it doesn't actually engage in effective public discussion and debate, as has been discussed extensively here this evening. And yet, as long as few residents pay attention and property taxes don't draw hostile reaction, this mode of operating proceeds unimpeded. I've been asking the following questions for years. If council believes monitoring and ensuring environmental sustainability of the village's way of life is not its job, whose job is it? If anyone wondered how to interpret council's refusal to answer that question, Commissioner Colavini's enumeration of council's duties at last week's meeting leaves no doubt. It's not council's job, and council has no idea how to answer my question. In response to my pointing out to council years ago that council used the phrase without defining it, the village manager put forward a definition of an objective that extended no farther than council's own operation. Council buys green products whenever possible. Now, as far as I know, although the village manager has no expertise in the subject area, he formulated the definition without consulting anyone who does have expertise. Nor did anyone in council ever indicate they assessed the proposed definition by consulting professional persons or publications that might provide assistance, insight, alternative definitions, and so on before acceding to it. We saw a duplicate of that pattern a few meetings back when council discussed the village manager's attempt to define a metric to apply toward the work of the new social services position. Again, the conversation that ensued suggested both the village manager and council members were well out over their skis trying to talk about what is an extremely challenging and complicated subject, not a policy consultant in sight. Last week, we saw another example, our esteemed mayor's response to criticism by Mr. Schmidt and others of council's ordinance change affecting Longfellow. Our esteemed mayor didn't respond directly to Mr. Schmidt's multi-factor critique of council's vote, other than to refer to all such criticism as no more than catharsis. Instead, our esteemed mayor simply repeated his commitment to his rationale for the decision. Given the circumstances, what choice does he have? Now, I'd like to believe that if Downers Grove had functioning leaders, those individuals would at least display a level of curiosity sufficient to investigate the aptness of mine or any other question about which they may have little initial appreciation or understanding, but recognize the need to investigate further. How should we understand what's going on when council and staff don't do that? It occurs to me to suggest an analogy to singing. Almost everyone can make musical sounds with their voice, but people have differing capacities to sing. Singing well is a combination of talent and, in most cases, training refined by experience. Because of that variability and capacity, it's important an individual has a reasonably accurate sense of their own ability to sing if they're going to sing in the presence of others. People enjoy listening to those who sing well. People who sing well enjoy singing with others who sing well. Singing well uplifts both singer and listener. If one learns to sing well, one may even learn to sing intentionally in a way that the rest of us do naturally, that is, off-key. The good singer usually sings off-key for humor, the rest of us because it's the best we can do. Thus, for most of us, it's best we sing only to ourselves or to those unable to distinguish between singing on and off-key, or to those who will remain friends regardless. Or we sing in a crowd when no one is listening to us and cares if we're off-key. Furthermore, in music, the difficulty of the song or the type of the song also affects the result. The more difficult the song, the more skilled the singer required to produce a pleasing result. However, even a person skilled in one style of music is not necessarily able to produce a pleasant result in another style. It's hard to imagine what Pavarotti doing rap or Willie Nelson doing opera would even sound like. So what's the parallel I'm trying to draw? That much of what councils are asked to deliberate on are the equivalent of simple songs, which means an acceptable decision will likely result regardless of the ability of the persons in office. However, the more difficult, complicated, or novel the issue, and the more challenging the times, unless a government entity is fortunate enough to have people in place sufficient to the challenge, a less than optimal result will likely occur, and the process of making the decision and the decision itself will result in bad feelings and ill will, and we're all left to clean up the ensuing mess. To extrapolate from a famous old movie line, a person on council and staff needs to know their limitations. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Any other public comment?
Hi, guys. A lot of emotion tonight, but we're going to have a little happy spin here. We've been waiting here a couple hours just to talk about an event that we're spinning up here. We've all got a lot of emotion. We've got speeding, we've got trees that are being lost, we have Longfellow being lost, we have the tower. I will take any of those problems in a second versus dealing with George Winkler. When a country's in war, and I don't want this to become a political statement, it's more of a humanitarian aid, but when a country is trying to defend themselves and their democracy and they just don't know what to do and the world's against them, it's people like us that are coming together, and I think you're going to say something on behalf of the village, but we came up with an idea to create a Ukrainian aid event. It started out as just a little idea with some friends. We were talking about how we can help raise some money and some donations and stuff. Like literally the next day, I met George. I'd never known this guy before a month ago. And he's like, well, what I'm doing now is I've got a precision circuits company. We make circuit boards for motorhomes. It's got nothing to do with raising events and everything. But he's getting collections from other churches, other surrounding areas, from DuPage County. And at night and on weekends, the people are getting together to package this stuff and ship it through his family network. From here, they truck it to the East Coast, into Warsaw, family members. Across the border, they drive it into Ukraine, and it goes exactly where those people need it at that moment. And it just drew me to the point where I got to hit this button. So I worked with a couple people. We got the Education Foundation involved. Danny introduced me to Janet, the president of that group, D99, the Rotary with Lisa Raisin. We got some great sponsors. We got some awesome partners. We have 25 different drop boxes around. We got an event coming up this Saturday from 5 to 7, adjacent to Wasabi. Had a temporary use permit and had to get an insurance product, which I was blown away that I needed to do that because it's public ground and I had to take up 3 parking spots, but we're willing to do that. And we've got Briley, who's going to warm up for Chris Gilmartin's going to share his musical talents, and then we have another band left of center. But anyways, I just wanted to jump in here and just give a little plug here, and then if you have anything else you want to say just on behalf of your family that's in Ukraine and what we're doing and what you've been through.
Well, first and foremost, I'm George Sapinski, Precision Circuits. We're here in Downers Grove. We actually manufacture electronics in the United States, which I'm really proud of. I have 50 family members in Ukraine. And the pictures you see on the news and everything like that is nothing compared to what's actually going on there. But let's not get negative about it. I really would like to thank you all for what you are doing. I feel Precision Circuits and all of our employees are kind of just vessels. We have to date shipped 40 tons of humanitarian aid to Ukraine. Where do we get that from? We got all that from events like this, from not just DuPage, but Will County, Cook County Sheriff, DuPage County Sheriff, all over the place. People are having these type of events, collecting medical aid, collecting food, collecting Pampers, collecting whatever we need. We're shipping toys for kids. Half the children in Ukraine have been displaced. It's just awful. It's genocide is what's happening there, and I can witness that secondhand. My family lives in Chernihiv. It's a city of 300,000 people. I was there 3 years ago. That city of 300,000 is now rubble. It's gone. And they need help, and it's these kind of events. There's people all over that are making it happen. It's private citizens. My good friend Carol Stream is meeting right now with the mayor in Lviv, trying to figure out how we individuals can help Ukraine. It's no government help, nothing like that. State of Illinois is actually bringing stuff to me to ship to Ukraine. So we are paying for that, getting it there, and that's what we're doing. But again, I feel like we're just a vessel, and this is just such a great event, and I really want to thank you for that opportunity.
Thank you, George, and thank you, Tom. And just to make sure that everybody's got the details, Mayor Barnett did ask me to say a few words, but I think it's better to hear it right from the folks that are running the event. Again, it's this Friday, May the 14th, from 5 to 7. Saturday, excuse me. And Bob warned me about that typo, too. Saturday, May the 14th, from 5 to 7. Everyone is invited to participate. We're looking for medical supplies, medicine drop-off, and all kinds of other supplies, as you heard. It's on Main Street in front of Wasabi. You'll hear from Commissioner Gil Martin. If you haven't heard him play, you're in for a treat. The donations will help the Ukrainian people in their struggle for freedom and self-rule. I know the mayor's planning on being there, and he hopes to see everyone there. I hope to see a really good crowd. So, thank you, Tom. Thank you, George. Any other public comment?
Mayor Pro Tem, cash donations will also be accepted, as I understand it, correct? Cash, yeah.
So there's a GoFundMe site that's up there. Unfortunately, you gotta pay 2.9% plus 30 cents for the transaction, but those monies are, tomorrow I'm actually going to make the first purchase from a charitable organization down in Woodridge. So every dollar I give them, I'm getting $5 worth of those.
They can't hear you at home.
I'm sorry. Yes, there's been a GoFundMe site that's been established, and every dollar that is donated, I'm able to buy $5 worth of goods from a charitable organization down in Woodridge, and I'm going there tomorrow afternoon. And they have literally pallets of stuff that we can get. So it comes in 50 surgical kits and suture kits and first aid kits, 50-pound boxes. It's going to cost $400 and it's valued at $2,000. So that's very valuable. Some families like to go and donate stuff. Other people like to just push a couple buttons and donate. So George and his people will take it any way you can get it.
Will you be taking cash at the event, Tom?
I'm running the money through a foundation, a brain cancer foundation, so I will direct you to that person. I don't want to be in charge of any cash or any tax implications, but yes.
Fair enough.
Anything will be done.
And there are also 18 donation boxes located throughout downtown Downers Grove where you can drop off supplies if you can't make the event. Thank you again, guys. Any other public comment? Okay. That brings us down to item 11 as we move things out of order here. Council member reports. This is an opportunity for members of the council to discuss items of interest, many organizations they're affiliated with, things of that nature. I will start with Commissioner Colavini.
Yeah, on behalf of the Downers Grove Historical Society, I'd like to thank everyone for attending our Founders Day events, including a bike ride in the morning and country in the park in the afternoon, and then also the Montre Dunham Awards. So each event was very well represented, and really appreciate the public coming out to support our history.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Stowski-Fugit.
Yep, echoing that, as a member of the Grove Foundation, I would like to thank everyone for coming out to Country in the Park. I had fun churning ice cream with everyone, and I hope everybody enjoyed the actual sample. We did actually make ice cream at the end, so we were able to sample that out to those who stayed until 3 o'clock. So thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Wallace.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I saw Jim Elliott with our local organization Dive Hard here earlier, and I'm guessing he just simply had to leave. So I want to make sure that I say what I believe he was here to say, which is that Dive Hard is hoping to fill 1,000 seats at the Tivoli Theater on May 18th at 6:30 p.m. to view what's called Adapting to Dive. It's a Dive Heart documentary premiere. You can buy tickets on events.eventgrove.com/event/adapting to dive, a Dive Heart documentary premiere, and they really do some fantastic things for the Dive Heart community and for our own community here in Downers Grove. Thank you so much, Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Glover.
Thank you, Commissioner Jose. Yeah, I guess I just want to thank George and Precision Circus for organizing that Ukrainian aid event, and Tom for engaging with me and connecting him with the Education Foundation. We've engaged before in the past and didn't agree, but I think this is one that we can all agree on, so I look forward to supporting the event, and thank you for what you guys are doing.
Thank you. Commissioner Bill Martin.
Yeah, I was going to share the same thanks to Tom and George and the team and all those who are sponsoring this weekend's event. Not only does this group have huge heart, but they have an amazing taste in entertainment. That's it, Mayor. Thank you.
I'm not going to try to top that. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you very much. Good night.